thank you again for inviting me to be with you here today. As you've just heard, I am the Medical Officer of Health for the City of Toronto. That means I lead Toronto Public Health, which is Canada's largest local public health agency. I have almost 1,800 staff working with me, and we are very proud to serve the residents of Toronto, almost 3 million of them. And we're responsible for ensuring that the programs, services, and policies that we deliver and serve to create are actually protecting and promoting the health of everybody in Toronto. I want to say that, you know, another very important component here, and I will raise this as we go through COVID-19, protecting and promoting the health of Torontonians and the work of public health is not just about, you know, improving health status and you know, for those who already enjoy good health. I think one of the key components here, and one of the messages I want to leave you with, is that, you know, what's important in public health is that, yes, we raise the health status of the community, but the way we do this is not by just raising those who already enjoy good health, but seeking to reduce the inequities that exist in health status, reducing the gap between those who enjoy good health and those who don't. And this is one of the most important points that I think has come through our experience with COVID-19. It's interesting to me when we think about a city like Toronto, what really drives health status isn't usually infectious diseases, right? Communicable diseases, infectious diseases are perhaps more significant in, you know, parts of the world that would be characterized as developing. But in a country like Canada, we generally don't think about infectious diseases or communicable diseases because they're not the major drivers of health status in our setting. But it's interesting to me that it took a major infectious disease outbreak, in fact, it's a pandemic, to actually lay bare those issues that really are driving health status in this city and throughout this country. And what that has to do with is income disparities, housing disparities, disparities and inequities in the social determinants of health. We know that when we look at COVID-19, it has impacted hardest and has had the most negative outcomes for those who already are suffering on many, many other levels. Those who don't enjoy access to housing, those who have inadequate incomes, those who don't have strong social networks. These are the kinds of factors that have really come to light as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And these are the things that you will hear me speak about more and more, because I think that if we want to restore the many good things that we enjoy here and in many other parts of North America, we have to address these things, these inequities in the long run. That's what will bring good health, the best health for all of us, regardless of what our background is. So with that, you know, let's get into the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, certainly we're all affected by it. The very fact that we're meeting by Zoom is just one, you know, implication, one consequence of what COVID-19 has done to our community. An unprecedented global pandemic. And what an unusual place for me. I mean, this is life-changing. And my sincere hope is that when the history books are written, that, you know, we will be remembered for having done the best we could with the knowledge we had at the time. And I think it's important to recognize that when we're talking about COVID-19 caused by SARS coronavirus 2, this is a new virus, completely unknown to us until early January of this year. And it has wreaked this kind of havoc. But I think the important part is that the science about the virus is still very much in development. We actually don't know everything there is to know about this virus because it was only discovered, sequenced on January the 12th, if I remember the date correctly. So we are really in the very early stages of learning about this virus. The science is unfolding So anyone who tells you that they've got all the answers and shows no sense of humility, no sense of uncertainty, is lying. There is nothing really 100% certain here. There is so much that we're still learning. And I think we need to be, as true scientists, right, as people who are, privileged to have high-level education. You're the UP Alumni Association. We are all privileged, regardless of which branch you studied or what particular area of study you focused in. We have that higher level of education. And that higher level of education, if nothing else, should teach us to be humble in how little we know about so many things, and to spark that level of curiosity to constantly seek higher understanding. What we do know about COVID-19 is that it's primarily spread through contact with the respiratory droplets, and sometimes those droplets are quite small, of those who are infected with the virus. Often through their cough or sneeze, sometimes through when they talk, sometimes when they sing. All the activities that we do when we're in close proximity with each other, these are the activities that actually spread the respiratory droplets of somebody who is infected with SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 disease. And generally, we know that these droplets generally spread up to 6 feet or 2 meters. Again, this is one of those areas where the science is evolving. People are beginning to think that it may spread a little further or linger a little bit longer in the air than we had originally thought. But we do know that keeping distance makes a difference. Physically distancing from other people makes a difference. We know that COVID-19 symptoms can include a number of things, and I'm just going to read this list because it's remarkable to me how varied the symptom presentation of COVID-19 is. Typical things, of course, with respiratory virus would be some that you see with COVID-19 infection. Fever, cough, difficulty breathing, unexplained fatigue, headache, sore throat, and runny nose that doesn't fit with seasonal allergies. But as well, there have been some unusual things that we don't expect to see with a coronavirus. Loss of taste or smell, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. Again, these are unusual symptoms of COVID-19, but they do happen, and they have been reported to happen. And we see as well that in younger individuals, they are getting skin manifestations of disease. COVID toes was one of the things that was written up. Yeah. And there's been a lot of specific case reports outlining those kinds of symptoms. But certainly anyone who has any one or more of the COVID-19 symptoms should go and get tested. And when you get tested, you should let people in your household know, one, that you're experiencing symptoms, two, that you're getting tested, and that they should also monitor themselves. Anyone that you have that level of close contact with, if you're suspecting that you may have COVID-19 yourself, individuals who live in your household should absolutely also be monitoring themselves for symptoms and watching to see how they feel. And they should get tested if they develop any of those symptoms. I think the interesting thing, though, of course, is that increasingly we are beginning to understand how significant pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19 disease is as well. There are a number of people, and it's not, we still don't know what proportion, because of course it's constantly changing, and it takes time to compile together all the data. But we, at the beginning, we had thought, like most other coronaviruses, we had expected that this one would spread most effectively, and that most spread would be attributed to, fairly symptomatic individuals. Increasingly, we are understanding that people are spreading disease before they develop symptoms. So they do eventually get symptoms, but they spread the disease before they even notice that they've got symptoms. And in some cases, they're actually spreading the disease without ever developing symptoms at all. And I think that's why we see so much activity all over the world. The case counts continue to rise. millions of people around the world infected. And in fact, when you look at the doubling time of infections, it just gets faster and faster. I think it took, 100 days to get to the first million cases, and it took about a month to get from 8 million cases to 9 million cases. So you can see that the transmission is really quite remarkable with this virus. And like many other viruses, it will mutate and change over time. And its natural desire, if I can give it human characteristics, is for the virus to become more and more transmissible. That's the biological imperative, right? All species want to reproduce and create more of themselves. That's the life force. That's the biological imperative of all species, and that includes organisms like bacteria and viruses. So I think these are important things to think about. We are making good progress here in Toronto and in Canada, I would say writ large, relative to many other places throughout the world.
Yeah.
And I think that comes because we are seeing really good commitment in general, really good participation from residents. And certainly in our city in Toronto, people are adhering to the advice. They're doing their best to stick to what we're advising them to do, as difficult as it is. We have had just over 15,000 cases over the course of the outbreak thus far in Toronto. And we have had more than 13,000 people, almost 14,000 people recover, thankfully, from COVID-19 in our city. And there are up and down every day fluctuations in our data, but we are absolutely seeing a decline in cases. One day earlier this week, we saw as few as 14 new cases in one day. So we have had some days where our increase day over day is quite low. So I can tell you that we are moving in the right direction thus far. We are providing information to our public, so I would encourage you, if you have a chance, to take a look at the Toronto Public Health website and follow our progress there. We have a monitoring dashboard that tells you how we're doing on the various indicators that we are following in order to understand whether our actions are having the desired impact. We know that yesterday, the vast majority of the province of Ontario moved into stage 3 of reopening. Much of the province of Ontario actually had relatively light activity when it comes to COVID-19, particularly when we look at the far north and more remote parts of the province. I think that when we look at the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, so the most populous areas of our province, we have all seen more activity. And I think the issue is that we are more densely populated. We have much more back and forth travel than certainly the more northern parts of the province between our city and other cities in Canada, or our areas of this province and other parts of Canada, but certainly also much more international travel. We are also a densely packed city. So any jurisdiction that we have seen where populations are living in close proximity to each other, given the nature of this virus, that creates the kind of circumstance that the virus, thrives in and transmits in well. But I think that at the end of the day, what we are looking at is that we know that there are, physical distancing, washing your hands, staying home when you're sick, and when you can't physically distance, wearing a mask. These are the kinds of things that actually make a difference in reducing transmission, keeping our rates as low as possible. And I would just encourage you to recognize and to continue on doing all these actions, because our continued success will rest on our ability to stick to all these public health actions. What I've been saying to the public when we were having daily briefings, now I'm down to twice a week briefing. But the message has always stayed consistent. And it is that if we want to get back to as close to pre-COVID life, as we can, whatever that, as close as we can get. I don't know that we're actually going to get to exactly pre-COVID life, in the near future. But I do think that we can get as close as possible to that, and our ability to do that rests on our ability to continue following public health advice and continuing implementing public health actions and measures every single day. Wash your hands, watch your distance, wear a mask. These are the things that we need to do, all of us, as much as possible in order to try to get back as much as possible we can to our regular lives. And it's complicated, right? I think it has been very challenging for everybody. People have been trying to juggle work and homeschooling their kids, or at least helping them through online learning. And many of us have had to be separated from other family members. We couldn't actually connect with our social network. These are all very challenging things to manage. And as good and as wonderful as Zoom might be, it doesn't replace, right, in any real way, that connection that you get, right, the strength that you get from actual face-to-face, in-person communication, right? So, and I recognize this, and I feel for everybody, because I feel it too. So, you know, my plea to everybody is to try to do our best, you know, to try to take care of each other. Where we can, connect in person outside, where the risk is much lower, right? The risk of transmission, the risk of inadvertent transmission, because we know there's asymptomatic transmission. We know there is pre-symptomatic transmission. So even if you don't have symptoms of illness, you may unknowingly have an infection with COVID-19 and inadvertently spread to others. That's why that watching your distance, wearing a mask, washing your hands, these I cannot emphasize enough. All these measures are the kinds of things that really make a huge difference. You know, I won't belabor the point, and I can see that there are questions that are coming up, but and I'd rather have more of a dialogue. That's always far more interesting and engaging. I would encourage people just to really think about, you know, others around you, and to think not only of physical health, but of mental health as well, just given the challenges that we have as a community at this time. And for each of you, and for those that are around you, I do think that, you know, especially in North American society, we talk a lot about mental health, but don't necessarily really do things that support, you know, mental health amongst us. So if I can just leave you with 5 quick points in respect of trying to promote mental health amongst yourselves, perhaps that's one way we can try to lift our community through this very challenging time. So, you know, first and foremost, and these are from, I mean, there are a number of different agencies that have promulgated these. I know that the Center for Addiction and Mental Health talks about these 5 steps towards mental wellness. It's kind of like, you know, for physical health, they say that have at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. Well, there's also 5 steps for mental health. And if you want to look at it that way, to say that, you know, you actually need your daily dose as well if we're to optimize mental health. So one is to connect with others, actually really connecting with people, right? We're social creatures. The more we're able to actually connect with each other, we know the better you're going to feel and the better mental health you will have. And it goes both ways, right? It's good for your mental health. It's also good for the mental health of the person who you're checking in with, particularly if that individual is isolated and can't get out. So I think connecting with others is very important. The second piece, you know, of the 5 is to be active. And this doesn't have to be a big production. Doesn't mean that you have to get, you know, kitted out with, you know, the latest running shoes or some really nice fancy gear or, you know, fancy equipment. You don't need any of that, right? Take the stairs, walk, right? These are simple ways. park a little bit further away from your, the main door of your destination and add a few extra steps to your day. These are very simple, and I think there is I know there is a growing body of evidence that talks about, or that focuses on the benefits of physical activity to mental health. These two are inextricably linked, and they do make a difference. Third is to try to learn something new every day. And again, this doesn't have to be a big production. When you're connecting with somebody, asking them a different question and finding out something new about somebody is just as much learning as anything else. So, and in this time of COVID, when many of us are somewhat restricted in our activities, reading the book that was on your, nightstand, waiting to be cracked open, now's a good time to do that.
Cross-stitch.
I know that certainly COVID has seems to have elicited the baking skills, or awoken baking skills in many people. Actually, my neighbor has decided to became a baker over the course of COVID-19. So we keep getting treated with the latest sourdough recipes of his, which is always nice. So whatever your interests are, pursue them. If you have the time now, why not take that opportunity? Learning something new is actually really good for your mind and for your mental health. The fourth thing is to be mindful, to be aware and present where you are. Actually, this is one of those things that I notice is a difference between what I would characterize as Canadian culture and Filipino culture in the way I observe it. And I realize that I have this probably a bit of a funny vantage point. Right? On the one hand, I feel very comfortable in the Philippines, and I feel that I can kind of get into the mindset. But by the same token, I also recognize that, having spent the vast majority of my life in Canada, I'm pretty North American too. So from where I sit, what I think is very interesting is that I find that as Canadians, the Canadian culture and mindset is kind of like, let's work really hard now, we'll delay gratification for some later point, right? It's always, there's always, we're working towards something in the future, which is a good thing. It has there are good elements to that. But I think in the process of always working towards some goal in the future, we forget to enjoy today. My observation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we take a Zoom vote, is that Filipinos are particularly good. Filipino culture is really good about enjoying what we have right now, right? Maybe almost too much. I'm not sure. Maybe not always necessary, and maybe you need a little bit of both. Yes, a little bit of planning for the future, but also taking the time to appreciate what we have right now, right? There is something to be said about really savoring the present. And that is something that I really appreciate and value from Filipino culture. So to my mind, we need a little bit of both. Yes, some goal orientation. Yes, some thinking towards the future. But I would say that Canadian culture is deficient in that we don't take the time to appreciate what's in front of us right now and to really enjoy it. Because, as I get older, you start to really appreciate how short life really is, and how much, the current time, like how valuable it is to, and how lucky we are to be able to enjoy what we have right now and how we should savor that more. So that's the fourth point. And the final and fifth fruit and vegetable equivalent for your mental health is giving back, right? That has also been increasingly studied in the literature. And we know that giving back to our community, giving back to others, actually is incredibly powerful and incredibly beneficial for your own mental health. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my remarks. Those are your mental health steps, your COVID steps. I think about the W's, right? Watch your distance, wash your hands, wear a mask, and work together. That's what we need to do as a community to see us through this very, very challenging time, which I know we will get through with some hard work and a little effort. So with that, I will wrap up my remarks. I see a list of questions coming. I'm not sure, did you want me to go through, or are you going to moderate the questions, or how would you like to do this?
I think May Rose can read the questions for you.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. de Villa. That was really inspirational and very informative. So in the interest of time, I will probably read just 2 questions with having a short answers. So
Sure, I'll be short.
No, I mean, so you don't have to take so much time to answer it. So let's start with the last one. This is from Rodolfo Reventor. Tito Rodolfo. My grandkids are coming tonight for my 14-year-old granddaughter's birthday in the backyard. Can we hug them? We usually wear masks.
Okay, so the current rule in Ontario right now is to maintain a social circle, and the social circle is supposed to be of no more than 10 people. If the people are in your social circle, you may hug them. The ones who are not in your social circle, we are strongly recommending that you stay away from that for now. There is risk. As I said, there is asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic transmission. So, and if you are of an age that you have grandchildren, by definition, you are at higher risk of infection. So my strong advice would be to, for those in your social circle, that's the whole benefit of the social circle. Those are the people you can have close physical contact with, outside of who's also in your household. So obviously the people you live with, you have lots of contact with. But the total circle of people is supposed to be no more than 10. Soon, I hope, we are getting to, as we're making progress, we will hopefully be able to expand our social circle. But for now, 10 in the social circle. Everybody else, try to keep distance as much as possible. And yes, absolutely, being outdoors is much better in terms of risk. Much lower risk of transmission. Not zero, right? Especially if you get close.
Mm-hmm.
It's not zero risk, but it is definitely lower.
And so here's the next one. This is from Tita Lita Segala. Being actor in the executive decision-making circle, can you give us idea if there is a discussion among city, provincial, or federal officials to deal more forcefully with people who disregard and openly go against the recommended steps such as wearing masks, therefore endangering other people, and oppose what officials like you are trying to do?
Yeah, so that is a constant subject of conversation. The challenge, of course, is, probably some of you saw that there was an individual it was in Mississauga, but at a grocery store who, right, everything's captured on video now, right? And there was a gentleman who really took issue with being asked to wear a mask, and then went off on some rant, and it was all captured on video. And the challenge with that is that you never know, right, what kind of person you're dealing with, and what actions they may engage in. So what we generally tell people is to look, right, we're going to do our very best. We try to educate people, tell them what it is we're asking them to do and why, right? Why is it important? And our sincere hope is that most people, and this is exactly what we've seen, this has been borne out in real life and in practice, but most people do care about their community. Most people have no interest in spreading disease to other people. Most people are trying to make decisions that they believe make sense for themselves. So we're finding that people are generally finding the advice, or following the advice, excuse me. Are there some people who are going to, disregard the advice? Yes. But if they're small enough in number, we will still be okay, right? And we will just have to continue to try to encourage them. I've generally found that while there are some situations that benefit from enforcement activities, I find in general that people are more likely to follow your advice, follow your the rules, and follow what are the recommendations if they understand why they're being asked to do them, and if we show them understanding. Um, you know, if you yell at people, that generally doesn't make them any more likely to do what we want them to do. That's just human nature. So it is a very delicate balance, but it is always education first, and only when the violations are flagrant do we then start to move towards an enforcement approach, because we just don't find the, you know, the aggressive sort of approach works very well. As I said, most people don't respond well to yelling or to, you know, what they see as attacks. It's more, we try to go with the good side of human nature. We try to, you know, appeal to that.